Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be about how some Nazis helped to save Israel during the Yom Kippur War in 1963. Now, I know that sounds incredible, and I know you haven't read about this anywhere, but it did happen. And I know this because I actually knew the Nazi scientists involved. They were friends of my father. They were co-workers of my father. Anyway, shall we start the story? All right, let's do this. So, in 1973, the Egyptians and all the other Arab countries decided that they wanted to drive the Israelis into the sea. So they attacked during a Jewish holiday, and they were very successful in the beginning. An example of that is this M48 tank that the Egyptians captured. Now, President Nixon decided that he wasn't going to allow the Arabs to slaughter the Israelis. So we intervened. We intervened by sending them a lot of our best tanks. Here's an example of it. Here's an M60 tank being unloaded off of a transport aircraft. Yeah, it was a very desperate time, and these tanks were put into the field as soon as they were unwrapped. Okay, but there is a big difference between the M48 and the M60, and it involved their sights. Okay, in fact, the reason why the Egyptians were so successful in the beginning of the war is because their Russian tanks had better night vision sights than the Israelis had. But then when these M60s showed up, they had better night vision sights than the Russians. Let me explain the differences. For the Israelis, the only way that they had to fight at night was either by launching flares into the air to illuminate the area, or sometimes they would put a floodlight right above the barrel of the gun, and they would use that to light up the area so they could see the enemy. Well, the latest Russian tanks that the Egyptian army had night vision technology that the Russians had developed using Nazi scientists that they had captured after the war. And it was what they call an active system. Okay, what does that mean? It was actively transmitting energy into the environment. Okay, and how was it doing that? It was the Russian tanks had, and you can see this on them if you look at the pictures, had what looks like a floodlight on it, but it doesn't broadcast light in the visible range. It would broadcast light in the infrared range. Okay, that was the active part. It was actively emitting ultraviolet light, or no, infrared light, and it had a sight that would allow it to see the light. So in other words, what the Russians had is they had a floodlight on their tank, just like the Israelis had, except the Israelis couldn't see their light. Only they could see their floodlight. And then the American tanks showed up. And these American tanks had the latest Starlight scopes. The Starlight scope was a passive system. And how it worked is it would accumulate the photons that were naturally occurring in the environment and amplify them about 1,000,000 times so that it was like you could see, except everything was green, because I don't want to get into it, but the green, anyway, that light is the easiest to amplify, right? But so everything looks like it's daylight. Okay, and it has another advantage. It can see the infrared beams. So when the M60 tanks went up against the Russian tanks, any Russian tank that had its infrared emitter on was lit up like a freaking lighthouse, and they were slaughtered. But here's the thing: the Israelis had had to learn how to operate those starlight scopes, and they needed it quickly. So they sent my father and his Nazi co-workers that had come over during paperclip, I'll explain that later, and they taught the Israeli soldiers how to use the sights just as they were, and then off they went to fight the Egyptians. Okay, and yeah, and that's how these Nazis, with a lot of help from the United States, helped save the Israelis in the Battle of Yom Kippur. Okay, so let me just give you a little more background. So, okay, what's going on here? All right, so it was how the Nazis got over. It was Operation Paperclip. We brought over how many? It should say it somewhere. Somewhere it should say 1,600 Nazi scientists were brought over. And everybody knows about their impact into our rocket program. But these scientists it wasn't all rocket scientists. They were also the scientists that were working on the night vision technology. Okay, the Russians got half, we got half. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. This technology, the Starlight Scope technology, was not the Nazi technology. We abandoned that technology in the late 50s and early 60s. Okay, and the Russians continued to develop it. So in the Battle of Yom Kippur, the Egyptians had the Nazi technology that the Russians had developed in their tanks, and we had the news technology. Now, maybe one day I'll tell you what the inspiration was. It was a foreign device that we got our hands on of unknown origin. That's what they told my father. But one day I'll tell you about that. But it's pretty obvious that the device that they had, that inspired them to go with the Starlight system, did not originate on Earth. But that is for a different video. So, and this is where my dad worked. This is where they worked. Okay, and here's like the little history. Okay, so here is the old Russian type stuff where they're broadcasting the infrared. Okay, this is the first night vision scope they came up with. Look how big that is. Now, 10 years later, it's that size. And you see this thing right here, this pair of goggles? My dad let me play with the prototype of that. I think it was like 71 or 72. Anyway, the bottom line, he let me and all my brothers play with the very first one of those. All right, and this guy, John Johnson, I don't know who he is. I'm not related to him. My dad was William Johnson. He is referenced here as one of the experts. Let's see, when did all that happen? Oh, by the way, they did a bunch of other stuff that you don't know about, like the FLIRs. The FLIRs, I was with him when he tested the FLIR. That was tested at the Newington exit on I-95, where we took video of. By the way, all my dad's coworkers loved me. They said I was precocious, and perhaps maybe I was allowed to see and hear things that a 15-year-old boy shouldn't have heard, been a part of. Anyway, I digress, but anyway, in here, when it says experts developing the FLIR, that was my dad. Yeah, here it is. Here we go. That was cool. I didn't know that. I was shocked because it was the tires of the cars would light up. Anyway, so that's how the Nazis came over in Operation Paperclip. They went to work at Night Vision Laboratories and developed this new type of technology, which gave the Israelis an advantage, significant advantage, during the Yom Kippur War. And there you go. So Nazis went to Israel and helped them defeat the Egyptians. And that's not in the history books, but it will. Maybe not this, century, but eventually that's going to get out because that's really freaking cool. Anyway, and if you want to hear more about the foreign device, although I might have done a video on that already, I don't know. It's a really cool story. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the video and talk to you later.